Welcome, literarians, or welcome back. This is the Literary Lori YouTube channel, and I'm Literary Lori, aka Lori L. Tharps, and we are back. And when I say we, I mean me. We are back with another exciting episode as part of my Black Literary History Month series. Today we are talking about none other than W.E.B. Du Bois, and we are talking about his contributions to the world of letters, the writing world. We are talking more specifically, though, about W.E.B. Du Bois' work as a novelist. Yes, did you know that amongst the millions of other amazing things that he did, he was also a novelist? And more specifically, W.E.B. Du Bois was a romance writer. I know. Let's get into it. So, before we talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, the novelist, I do want to give you an overview for those of you who might not know of some of his backstory. So let's start with the basics. So first, W.E.B. Du Bois was born William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, okay? He was born on February 23rd, 1868. Now, people always mess this up because, what are you supposed to call somebody who goes by W.E.B. Du Bois? Are you supposed to call him Webb, W.E., W.E.B.? Well, apparently he preferred people to call him Dr. Du Bois. So we're going to do that to make this whole thing easier. But yes, his full name was William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, and he was very clear that he wanted people to pronounce his name Du Bois, not DuBois, which is interesting because his father actually emigrated from Haiti. So you would think that you would pronounce it with the French accent, but I don't know the story behind that, but he was very clear and would correct people. It's Du Bois. So, Dr. Du Bois was born in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. His mother was part of the family of free Black people. She was from a long line of free Black people, I should say. And like I said, his father, Alfred Du Bois, was born in Haiti but had emigrated to the United States. Unfortunately, Alfred Du Bois left the family, leaving his wife and young son forced to move back in with her parents. Du Bois's mother actually suffered a stroke and eventually died when Dr. Du Bois was only 17 years old. So he was clearly somebody, he had family members, but obviously he was a person who had a lot of hardship as a young person. That obviously didn't stop his phenomenal career. Du Bois got a bachelor's degree at Fisk University, and be clear that he actually had to work to pay for his education. He was doing other different types of work, including teaching, but he did get his bachelor's degree at Fisk, and then he got a second bachelor's degree from Harvard. I don't know if you knew that. People often know, this is often touted, that Dr. Du Bois was the first African American to actually get a PhD from Harvard. So yes, he got a bachelor's degree and a PhD from Harvard in 1895 is when he got his PhD officially. All right, so we know that Dr. Du Bois is very famous for a lot of his nonfiction books, for his activism, and also for some of the language that he gives us when we discuss race and Blackness in America. So one of the second book that Dr. Du Bois wrote was called The Philadelphia Negro, and it was a sociological study of African Americans in Philadelphia. Now, interestingly, but many people know Dr. Du Bois for his coining the phrase, the talented 10th, which referred to the elite class of Black society. But did you know that in the Philadelphia Negro, it was actually in that book, that he coined the phrase, the submerged 10th, and that was to describe the Black underclass. And he actually got a bit of flack about that, but still, that was a term that he coined. And then the talented 10th was almost like in response to the submerged 10th. Okay. Now, he did believe initially that it would be the talented tenth of society who would drive the growth of the uplift of the black race. Later on in his career, he realized that that was not true due to the fact of racism, that racism would not allow even the greatest, the most talented, the most privileged, if there was still such insidious racism, that wasn't going to be a theory that would actually work. In 1903, Dr. Du Bois published probably what is his most well-known and most influential book, which of course is The Souls of Black Folk. And that is actually a book of 14 essays where he does talk about multiple different aspects of being Black in America. But it is in that book where he introduces us to the concept of double consciousness of the American Negro and the idea of the Negro problem, the race problem being the most important problem that American society is going to have to solve. Now, of course, like I said, The Souls of Black Folk is probably his most well-known work, and the Modern Library has declared it one of the 100 most influential works of the 20th century. So, Dr. Du Bois is a sociologist. He's a historian. He's a professor. He's writing. He's teaching. He's lecturing. He's advocating for all levels of uplift, betterment, and improvement of society for Black people, but also just for society in general, because he understood that if Black people had more agency, access, etc., that the United States would obviously improve. In 1910, Dr. Du Bois was one of the founders of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, and he was quickly became the editor of that organization's magazine called The Crisis. That magazine, The Crisis, was a literary journal. It was a news magazine. It was a culture publication. It was so important and still runs today, by the way. But even in those early days, it had such great circulation. Apparently, it reached nearly 100,000 people while Dr. Du Bois was the editor. Okay. So I think these are things that most people know about Dr. Du Bois, that he was one of the founders of the NAACP, that he edited The Crisis, that he wrote Souls of Black Folk. So let's talk about W.E.B. Du Bois. Let's talk about Dr. Du Bois. Dr. Du Bois, right? He wanted me to call him that. Let's talk about his creative writing, okay? So we know he wrote multiple nonfiction books about sociology, academic books, but he was also writing books for the common people. And I would argue that The Souls of Black Folk was not meant to be a book for academia or for quote unquote learned folk. It was for the people. And he was conscious of writing more books for the people as well. He wrote something what we would call somewhere between memoir and autobiography. And he was very experimental with the form of these books, these autobiographies and memoir, where he would include essay, personal stories, even poetry. And he wrote 3 of these autobiography/memoirs. One was called Dark Water, Voices from Within the Veil. That was published in 1920. And then he wrote another called Dusk of Dawn, an essay toward an autobiography of a race concept. That was in 1940. And he tried to explain race and racism through his own story. And then he wrote a traditional autobiography called The Autobiography of W.E.B. Du Bois. That actually came out after his death in 1968, but it was his own work. So now let's get to the novels. Yes, raise your hand if you knew that W.B. Du Bois was writing fiction. I didn't know that. I honestly didn't know. And I feel like, again, Du Bois has been a figure in my imagination who I felt a kinship with in certain ways. Just as a writer, as a Black intellectual, a thinker, cultural critic. And actually we had W.B. Du Bois was the one who insisted that the New York Times capitalize the N in Negro when talking about the Negro people. And it was a battle he fought. And it was him that I emulated when I started arguing that we must capitalize the B in Black for Black people. And it was often his writing, his editorial in the New York Times that I looked to as inspiration. And so, again, I have been a student or an admirer of Du Bois for a long time, but I didn't know he was a novelist. So not only, and it wasn't like he wrote one little novel, okay? He wrote 5 novels, including a trilogy. But let's talk about his romance novel, because this is the part that, again, if I do anything in these series, it's I want to blow y'all's minds. I want to make you all learn something that you really didn't know. So our friend Dr. Du Bois, Mr. Intellectual, wrote a romance novel called Dark Princess, a Romance. In case you didn't know, like it's literally called Dark Princess, a Romance. And this was written in 1928. And the journalist Akhil Kumarasamy, he wrote in The Atlantic, actually, I don't know if Akhil is a man or a woman. Akhil wrote in The Atlantic about discovering this romance novel of Du Bois, and this is how Akhil summarized Dark Princess. So it starts, Dark Princess begins in New York City with Matthew Towns, an aspiring obstetrician who is prevented from continuing his medical studies because he is Black. After leaving school, he travels to Berlin where he meets Kautulia, a purple-haired princess from India who invites him to join a secret coalition working to overthrow white imperialism and achieve self-sovereignty for the darker races. Sounds a little bit like Du Bois' own experience, who he also studied in Berlin. Ultimately, let me go on about the book. Ultimately, the book is a love story between Princess Kautulia and Matthew that spans years. Matthew ends up in prison in Chicago and later becomes involved in local politics, while the princess works in factories and unions around the United States. When they finally reunite after years apart, Matthew says to Princess Kautulia, quote, "And on that night when my body kissed yours, a billion years lived in one heartbeat. What more can I ask?" Oh, Dr. Du Bois, you a little romantic. Oh my goodness. I am like dying. I have to get a copy of that book. I have to get a copy. And apparently you can get a copy of it. I believe it's still in print. Now, apparently when Dr. Du Bois was writing his novels, nobody paid him no mind. They were like, no, we just want you to write your serious nonfiction work. And yeah, and people didn't really give him a whole lot of credit for his fiction. But I mean, who writes a romance novel in the midst of all of the drama, in the midst of, saving the world, running the NAACP, editing the crisis? I'll tell you who, Dr. Du Bois. And you have to be a certain kind of someone to stop what you're doing or maybe secretly sit down and write a romance novel. Dr. Du Bois, I see you. And I want to give you all the credit. I hope your spirit understands that we appreciate what you did, okay? And then that's not it. So again, he's not getting a whole lot of credit. And he's certainly not, on the top of the bestseller list for romance writers. But that doesn't stop him from turning to fiction again and again. So the romance novel Dark Princess comes out in 1928. His first novel, The Quest of the Silver Fleece, came out in 1911. Then he turns back to fiction when he's 89 years old, okay? So he has nothing to prove. So he says, I'm going to write not just a novel, but a freaking trilogy, okay? It's called the Black Flame Trilogy. All right. And the Black Flame trilogy, there's the main protagonist's name is Manuel Monsart. And the novels follow Manuel as he grows up, becomes an educator, builds a university, and travels abroad. Again, sounds familiar, Dr. Du Bois, right? But I mean, what else are you going to do when you're 89 years old? You're going to turn to fiction and you're going to fictionalize your life, or you're going to pull elements from your life story and probably make it a better ending than the one you ended up with, which was the United States revoking Dr. Du Bois's passport because he had grown disillusioned with capitalism and America's version of democracy, had turned to socialism, was flirting with communism, and the United States was like, oh, no, you didn't, took his passport away, refused to renew it, and so he was like, I'm out of here, went to Ghana and became a citizen of the country of Ghana. And he lived there for the final years of his life. So, and he actually became a citizen. So Dr. Du Bois died on August 27th, 1963. He was 95, okay? He lived a good long life. And ironically, the day after Du Bois died was the March on Washington led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Think about that. So I wanted to leave you with this idea of this man who was busy trying to save the world, like literally trying to save the world, writing, researching, lecturing, traveling, like giving the best of his brain to an ungrateful country who, published his books but didn't change their ways at all. And so I like to think that Dr. Du Bois turned to fiction as, the only place that maybe he could, create that happy ending for Black people, for his protagonists in his stories. So I recommend, because I'm sure many people watching have already read The Souls of Black Folk, have read The Philadelphia Negro, have read some of his greatest essays. But have you read his fiction? Have you read his romance novel? Like, let's do that. And especially those of you who are listening who are writers, let's read his romance novel. Let's see what struck his imagination and what he put down on the page, because I think that's where we can really see who a person is. Dr. Du Bois was, people said he was, he was kind of standoffish, a little prickly, but I mean, he deserved that. I mean, he had the right to be that. So I feel like reading his fiction would give us insight into who he really was on the inside, a softer side, and, maybe what he dreamt about, what he fantasized about, besides Princess Kutalia. So I hope that gives you something to think about, something to be inspired by. And the takeaway that I hope you guys get also is that, like, fiction can also be a way for you to try to change the world. I'm sure Dr. Du Bois didn't write these novels just because, he's doing it for himself, because if he was, he wouldn't have published them. They were published. I'm sure he thought, well, why not try another way to reach the people? He understood that, and he understood the power of literature, whether it was fiction or nonfiction. All right, I hope you find the books. I will put links to the ones that I can find in the description below. Let me know if you already knew that W.E.B. Du Bois, that Dr. Du Bois was a novelist. I want to hear who did know and who might have read some of his fiction. Let us know in the comments, all right? Thanks so much for watching. This is our last week of the series. Keep showing up. I'll be here every single day till the end of February. Bye.